So I oftentimes think that kids who grew up in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s are kind of defined by what their favorite TV network is, where some are Disney kids, some are Cartoon Network, and a lot of people like me were Nickelodeon kids, where we like the zany humor. But going in and looking at the history of Nickelodeon, I just have one question. Why did they ditch the black people? And the significance of Nickelodeon for black people is one of the first ever shows they did, which was live action, was All That, which took fame for having the same amount of black cast members as white cast members, and they actually had a majority minority cast. In the later seasons of the mid-2000s, a lot of people noticed the cast was much whiter, where it was about 30–40% white in the first season, but then 80–90% in the final season. It wasn't just All That. In the late 1990s, Nickelodeon was known for having a lot of shows that featured heavily black casts like Kenan and Cal, Cousin Skeeter, Little Romeo, and many more. When you go to the mid to late 2000s, the shows become a lot more white in the process, where they did have some black characters, but there was always just really one in the cast. In fact, Ned's Declassified was a big example of Nickelodeon noticing this, where they had nearly an entirely white cast in the first pilot they did, so they had to delay the show another year. Because that they actually had to redo the same exact pilot with Daniel Cook to play the character of Cookie, replacing the previous actor that had it. Playing this, it all really happens with Dan Schneider, who a lot of people give a lot of criticisms for, many of them justified, but one good thing about Dan Schneider is he likes black people almost as much as he likes feet. One innovation that Dan Schneider came up with was in the early 90s when he joined Nickelodeon. He noticed Disney had a problem where their Mickey Mouse Club and almost all their shows had near 100% white cast, so he wanted to change that. Dan Schneider actually did a really good job at that. He did have a lot of shows that were filled with diverse cast, and he was really the lead behind it, but then in the mid to late 2000s, he stopped doing that for heavily white shows. And I'm trying to figure this out, and I think one big factor was definitely Disney Channel adopting more black casts in their shows, with the first one being the famous Jet Jackson, which went for 65 episodes and started in 1998. And Disney had a really big win with That's So Raven in the early 2000s, which became the most watched show on Disney Channel, so at that point, they were no longer the white network, and they did have diversity. Meanwhile, Nickelodeon got a lot more popular too, where in the 90s they were the underdog to Disney Channel, but in 2001 they officially surpassed Disney Channel in ratings, and it was largely due to SpongeBob and the popularity of the animation department. That was definitely a sad factor for how Nickelodeon saw things, where in the 90s they saw themselves as the underdog, so of course they make Kenan and Kel and all of that, but in the 2000s, when they're now officially beating Disney Channel and Disney also has black lead actors in their shows, they decided to go more white because now they're the mainstream show. There were also just some controversies around the shows Nickelodeon was making, where they did have the show Cousin Skeeter, which went for 2 seasons. Now, I really liked this. My siblings and I would crack up over watching it when we were kids, but there was this huge thing going on where a lot of people said it depicted black people in this weird way, and kids were only liking the show because it featured a black puppet that exhibited a lot of stereotypes. Also, rolling all this in, I think the final factor came into just how things worked out with the Amanda Show. The reason the Amanda Show got made in the first place was because of All That, where Amanda Bynes started there, but they did some research and found that she was actually the most popular actress on the show, so because of that, Dan Schneider decided to give her her own show. When it came to the Amanda Show, the 2 most popular characters in the series were Drake and Josh, who naturally got their own spin-off. Of course, the most popular character on Drake and Josh was Miranda Cosgrove, who a lot of people love, so she got her own spin-off show with iCarly. Again, that progressed to Victoria Justice doing an episode in iCarly where a lot of people liked her character, so they decided to give her own in-universe spin-off with Victorious, and then that led to Sam and Cat, and that's why things got a lot whiter from there. And there's the final thing that I was forgetting about, and that's that Nickelodeon wanted pop stars. They wanted to take people like Ariana Grande and Victoria Justice and sign them to do concerts, shows, and make a lot of money on that outside of just the show itself. Disney's first real attempt at that was Hilary Duff doing Lizzie McGuire, where they also tried to turn her into a pop star, and even though that didn't go as well as some other stars like Selena Gomez or Miley Cyrus, it was a good first start that Nickelodeon wanted to copy. Again, because Nickelodeon wanted to do a pop star show, the idea was they needed to push out more shows with girls because they weren't convinced boys would produce pop stars, and at the same time they also wanted to appeal to larger demographics, so because of that the shows got whiter and whiter. Yeah, during this era, there still were some shows that were black lead characters on Nickelodeon, like True Jackson VP, but they got a lot less attention, they had more and more white cast in them, and they just didn't pack the same punch where Nickelodeon wasn't pushing them like iCarly. That really is kind of it. At some point, it kind of makes sense where it was just a natural progression of Amanda Bynes being popular, then Drake and Josh being popular, and then Miranda Cosgrove being popular, and that's what did it itself. But at the same time, I think there definitely was this mentality that Nickelodeon had going in, that they were the underdog, so because of that, they were going to do a bunch of shows with minorities because Disney wasn't doing that. But then the moment Disney adopted that, they decided to get away from it, and also when they got popular, they went mainstream and hired more white people, which I think is pretty sad. But with that, I'm Charles Pearl. Please subscribe to learn something.